If you want your baby to sleep well, then you need your baby to take a full feeding. You don't want your baby waking up early from naps because your baby is hungry because your baby didn't get enough food in the last feeding. That, of course, is easier said than done. So in this video, we're going to talk about how to tell if your baby is getting a full feeding or not. Before we go further, hi, my name's Valerie. I have been blogging at babywisemom.com since the year 2007. I have 4 children and they range currently in ages from 8 to 16 years old. Okay, one good sign to know that your baby is getting a full feeding is that your baby is eating long enough. For most newborns, a typical feeding time range should be 30 to 40 minutes. One way to make sure your baby is getting a full feeding is to make sure your baby is eating for a long enough amount of time. There is a typical average of how long you can expect a baby to eat, how long it will take a baby to take in a full feeding. That does range by age. For a newborn, for most babies, you're kind of looking at starting out about 20 to 30 minutes long. Some newborns will take as long as 40 minutes, and they can take as long as 40 minutes throughout that newborn stage. Some babies can even be a little faster, but for most newborns, you're going to find 20 to 30 minutes is the right amount of time. Once you find your baby's correct amount of time, your baby will get faster as your baby gets older, and babies seem to get significantly faster right around 3 months old. So expect at 3 months old that no matter how long your baby's taking, that your baby will get faster at that point. I had one super fast feeder, and she started out life at 20 minutes, but by 3 months old, it was 10 minutes or less, and then even faster as she got older. So, some babies can just really drink fast, and some are slower. If your baby's taking longer than 40 minutes to eat, your baby is most likely napping during a feeding, which is not what you want to happen, because then your baby's taking power naps. We all know about power naps. Power naps make you so you're not as tired and can get you through the day. So if your baby's taking even just a 5-minute power nap in the middle of that feeding, your baby's not going to be as tired for nap and either won't go down to sleep in time or will go down to sleep but then wake up early because of that power nap. So you really want to make sure that your baby is staying awake during that feeding, which is so hard. It's so hard to keep newborns awake. As they get older, it's pretty easy, and then your challenge is keeping them from being distracted during a feeding. But you want to make sure your baby's staying awake, so try all the tactics to keep baby awake during a feeding. If your baby's eating a lot faster than that 20 minutes as a newborn, then your baby's probably not getting enough food. So keep baby going, and also as your baby gets older and distracted, you can think, oh, baby's done, but really baby was just distracted. So there's always some challenge with making sure your baby's getting a full feeding. Stick with it. You also want to make sure your baby has a good latch. If your baby has a tongue tie or a lip tie, it can slow your baby down, or it can make your baby less efficient and not get as much milk out in that amount of time spent eating. Let's talk about some common signs that your baby is indeed done with that feeding. One sign is that your baby will unattach, whether you're breastfeeding or bottle feeding, and then won't stay attached if you reattach baby. Another sign is kind of fun, is that your baby's hand will open and relax. You'll notice that most babies, as they start to eat, they'll have their hand in a little fist, and then as they become full, then they'll relax that hand and it opens up. Another sign that your baby's full is that your baby will turn away from the milk source. Another sign is that the milk is gone. So if you're bottle feeding, you see the milk is gone. If you're breastfeeding, then your breasts feel empty. And another sign is that your baby is easily distracted. Hopefully by the time your baby is in that 4-ish months old, when every little noise distracts them, hopefully by then you've really come to understand your baby and how much time your baby needs to eat and what it's like to have a full feeding. But make sure that if your baby's super distracted while eating, your baby's probably done. So as you're getting to know your baby and trying to make sure your baby's getting enough food, then you want to watch your baby's growth. That is a great sign to tell you if your baby's getting enough food or not. Your baby should follow a consistent growth curve, a consistent growth pattern. There are times when you go to the doctor, if you happen to go to the doctor like right before a growth spurt, then your baby's growth curve is going to kind of be stunted a little bit. Or if you go to the doctor right after a growth spurt, then it's going to shoot up a little bit more. So the timing of exactly when you go to the doctor can definitely impact that curve, but in general, over time, you want this to stay on the same curve. If your baby started out life as a 20%er, probably going to stay about 20%. I mean, that can change, but it's not a problem for your baby to be in the 10th percentile if that's where your baby always is and continues to stay there. The problem is when your baby starts to drop. So make sure your little one stays in the same growth curve as typical. Your little newborn should be back to birth weight by 2 weeks old. So that's a great sign. If by 2 weeks old your little one's back to birth weight, then you know that he or she is getting the proper amount of food at each feeding. And typically babies gain 5 to 9 ounces per week. So those are some growth things you can watch to make sure that you're getting enough milk at each feeding. Another great sign that you can tell if your baby's getting enough at each feeding is diaper output. So you want to track how many wet diapers a day does your little one have, how many poopy diapers a day or a week does your little one have. So the amount of wet and dirty diapers will vary by age, but initially you want at least 5 to 6 wet diapers. And then for the pooping, you're kind of looking more for consistency than an exact number. Babies really do vary. All of my babies varied. I had some that basically pooped at every feeding, and I had some that pooped once or twice a week. So you could be like 4 times a day, or you could be 1 or 2 times a week for the pooping. You just want your baby to be consistent for your baby. Another really great sign that your little one's getting enough at each feeding is that he or she is content after the feeding during that wake time. So during the normal span of playtime, you have a happy, content baby. Your little one should be happy while eating, and then during that playtime, should be content and happy during the playtime. Whether you have a really little newborn and that playtime basically is like 5 minutes long, or you have a 3-month-old who's awake longer than that. Your baby should have energy and be alert as is typical for the age, but if your baby is super fussy right away, and not like if you have an older baby who's trying to practice a new skill and gets frustrated because it's not working, that's normal. It's normal to have playtime frustrations, but we're just talking like super fussy, discontent, you can't seem to console your little one, then there's probably some hunger going on, and that's when you want to look into milk supply or consider maybe my little baby napped throughout that feeding when I thought she was eating and she didn't really get food, or look at the lip tie or tongue tie to see if your baby's actually able to be efficient enough to take in the milk needed. And finally, you can rest assured that your little one is getting enough at each feeding if your baby can stay on the schedule. This is a huge benefit of having a schedule, is that you can be quite confident that your baby's needs are being met. So if your baby is able to stay on a regular feeding schedule and sleeps well, you know that your baby's getting enough food. That wraps up knowing whether or not your baby is getting a full feeding. So follow these steps and tips to keep track of your baby and make sure that everything's going well. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments, and I will see you next time. Thank you for watching.